Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good evening, all. Right. So we had a session right previously. Right. I was just briefing you about what is big data, why Hadoop and Spark, drawbacks with the current databases, advantage of Hadoop and Spark, right? The Hadoop and Spark job market and PySpark. So here Hadoop is meant for two things. Hadoop is meant for both storage and for processing. Hadoop is meant for storing as well as processing. Any technology performs storage or processing, but Hadoop performs both storage and processing. For storage, does it use any database? No, databases has got some drawbacks. Despite of those drawbacks, still Hadoop doesn't go with databases. It is going with a kind of file system called Hadoop distributed file system. For processing, MapReduce or Spark. Hadoop is meant for batch applications. Hadoop is not for online applications. Online applications means user interactive application. User gives the input, but in batch applications, user doesn't give any input. User non-interactive applications. Credit card statements for millions of customers. Example, right? Generating credit card statements for millions of customers here, user input is nowhere required. But if it booking a movie ticket, user input is required. Making an online transaction, user input is required, right? I was talking about in the previously, I was talking about drawbacks with the current databases. Most of the databases, a limited storage, no parallel processing. If volume increases, speed decreases. The volume of the data is increasing. Total amount from sales one, total amount from sales two, total amount from sales three. 10 records, 10 lakh records, 10 crore records. Record to record, record to record, right? If the volume increasing, if the volume is increasing, speed decreasing, right? Yes. Even if complexity increases, the speed decreases, right? Even if complexity increases, speed decreases. Total amount, the average amount, standard deviation of amount. Here, average amount takes more time, right? As compared with the sum. First sum to be calculated, next average has to be computed. As compared to this, average amount takes more time. Standard deviation of amount. Standard deviation of amount, right? Lot of internal processing is required. Lot of internal processing is required. Databases can handle only structured data. They cannot handle unstructured or semi-structured data. So these are the major drawbacks, right? With the databases. We've come to this Hadoop advantages, right? Hadoop advantages. Unlimited data storage. Unlimited data can be stored. Unlimited data storage. Horizontally unlimited number of unlimited slaves. Very high speed processing because of parallel processing. Can handle all varieties of data, structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. It's open source. No licensing is required. Commodity hardware. Can run on all the hardwares. Doesn't mean that it should have highly configured, right? It can run on any heavy hardware configuration. Why databases like Oracle cannot support unlimited storage? Even databases can go with multiple systems or multiple slaves. Talk about these databases and max limit on the number of slaves. Oracle can go with a maximum 256 nodes for storing its data. MySQL with 54. MySQL Express with 256. SQL Server 256. DB to 256. Teradata can go with a maximum 512 nodes. Teradata, Netija, and Vertica, they're used for data warehouse, right? Specialized databases used for data warehouse purpose. So all these three 512 nodes. But these two, Teradata and Netija, currently they are going with 1024 nodes for storing its data. So here, but there is no limit on the number of slaves that Hadoop can have, right? Yahoo, when first time implemented Hadoop, went with 4,000 nodes for storing its data. Currently, Yahoo going with 12,000 nodes for storing its data. Systems, nodes means systems. Facebook, when first time implemented Hadoop, Facebook, when first time implemented Hadoop, went with 8,000 nodes for storing its data. Currently, Facebook going with 52,000 nodes for storing its data. So if you see the speed, if you see the speeding, this is what Hadoop is prevent storage point of view and even processing point of view. If we talk, it has taken a table. Yahoo has taken a table to check the speed of different databases. Has taken a table of 100 TB consisting of 1024 columns. Task sorting based on 16 columns. Time taken, right? Oracle has taken nearly 3.5 days to process. MySQL, right? It has taken nearly 6 days. Teradata, like 4.5 hours. Netija, 3 hours. Hadoop, 3.4 minutes. Latest version of Hadoop has just taken 1.2 minutes. Okay, so these have taken days of time. These have taken hours of time, but Hadoop has taken minutes of time. But even Hadoop has got very high speed, right? Hadoop has got very high speed. But Spark is 100 times faster than Hadoop. Spark is 100 times faster than Hadoop. See the speed of Spark. Already Hadoop has got very high speed where it has taken only minutes of time. But Spark is 100 times faster. Okay. So very high speed processing, right? Both Hadoop and Spark commonly used together, right? Yes. So now, how exactly data stored? See how exactly. See, before that, I was discussing about architecture, right? Yes, if you observe, Hadoop was just talking about this. Hadoop doesn't follow client server. Hadoop doesn't follow client server architecture. It doesn't follow client server architecture. Hadoop follows a master slave architecture. It follows master slave architecture. It follows master slave, single master, multiple slaves architecture. Hadoop cluster means group of nodes, group of nodes means systems connected in a network. Hadoop cluster means group of nodes, systems connected in a network. There are two types of nodes, master node, slave node. There are two types of nodes, master node and slave node. Master node, we call it as a name node. Slave node in Hadoop terminology like a data node. Master node responsibilities, yes. Task assignment, load balancing, assigning tasks to the slave systems. The task should be equally given to all the slaves. If the fault tolerance means if any systems fails, multiple tasks are executed by multiple systems parallelly. If any one slave, if any one slave fails, then the task of it has to be assigned to any of the other slaves. Health monitoring. Health monitoring, right? Yes. Okay. Slave node responsibilities, storing the data and processing the data. Slave node, okay, just observe this diagram once. Hadoop follows master and slave architecture, single master and multiple slaves. S1, S2, S3 up to Sn. So this is master, these are slaves. Master node. This is slave node. Slave nodes we call it as data nodes. Means data stored within the slaves, data processed by the slaves. Means if we talk about any file f1.txt, this we call it as a cluster. Group of systems connected in a network. Group of systems connected in a network. Two types of nodes, master node, slave node. Group of nodes connected in a network. One is master, remaining all are slaves or data nodes. So f1.txt. You have got a file f1.txt. We have got f1.txt. The file, for example, each system capacity 1 TB, 1 TB, 1 TB, 1 TB. This file size is 2 TB. It cannot fit into any of the slave systems. It has to be divided into smaller parts and has to be distributed across multiple systems. The advantage we see is distributed. Data is distributed across multiple systems and data is processed by multiple systems. Data stored across multiple systems. Data processed by multiple systems parallelly. Data stored across multiple systems and data processed by multiple systems parallelly. Distributed storage and parallel processing. Fine. How exactly the data stored and processed, right? How exactly the data stored and processed in Hadoop. In Hadoop, data is stored in the form of files. In Hadoop, data is stored in the form of files. Each file is again subdivided into subdivided. File is again subdivided into blocks. File is again subdivided into blocks. Blocks are distributed. Multiple slave nodes and are processed. Blocks are distributed across multiple slave nodes and are processed. Default block size. Default block size is 64 MB. Latest versions, it is 128 MB. Default block size 64 MB. In latest versions, it is 128 MB. For example, I got f1.txt. Size is 200 MB. f1.txt size is 200 MB. Assume it is some banking data. It has got some banking data. Default block size. Assume that default block size is 64 MB. Default block size 64 MB. Number of blocks into how many blocks? Number of blocks. File size by default block. File size by default block size. So f1.txt size is 200 MB. It has got banking data, right? Default block size 64 MB. Number of blocks File size by default block size. File size is what? 200. Two hundred by 64. 200 by 64 means like approximately right 4 blocks. Approximately 4 blocks. B1, B2 means 64, 64, 64. 192 you will get plus 8 MB. Fourth block. Fourth block has got 8 MB. B2, B1, B2, observe here, B3. B4. B1 block, B1 block 64 MB. B1 block has got 64 MB. B1 block 64 MB. B2 block also like 64 MB. B3 block also 64 MB is stored. In B4 also 64 MB. Sorry, in B4 8 MB only. 8 MB only. 64, 64, 64 means 192. 8 MB only in the means 56 MB free here. 56 MB free. I got F2 dot same thing. Same thing I'll copy. There's one more file. Assume you got one more file. F2.txt. Size exactly 192. Assume that you got some telecom data. Default block size 64. Number of blocks 192 by 64. Exactly 3 blocks. So here B5, B6, B7, B5 has got 64 numbers. So these are stored in which system? System start system 1. This in system 2. This in system 3. B5, B6, B7 also they are storing 64 MB, 64 MB, 64 MB. 64 MB in this, 64 MB in this, 64 MB in this. S4, S5, S6. Here my query is 56 MB is free here. Why this B5 data is not stored in this B4? When 56 MB is free. When 56 MB is free, why B5 data not stored in B4? Retrieving f1.txt. Retrieving f1.txt means combining this B1 plus B2 plus B3 plus B4. B1 plus B2 block plus B3 plus B4. Retrieving f1.txt, right? Okay. If B5 data, assume that if B5 data stored in B4, assume if B5 data stored in B4. If B5 data stored in B4, right? For example, 64, series 64, 64, 64 plus 8 plus 8 MB plus 56 MB. That equal to 256 MB. Two 56 MB you got, but actual file size is 200 MB. Wrong computation, right? When we retrieved f1.txt, when we retrieved f1.txt, design principles with respect to HDFS blocks. HDFS blocks. Design principles with respect to HDFS blocks. Every file should have dedicated number of blocks. Dedicated number of blocks. Every file should have dedicated number of blocks. Means file 1 should have its own blocks, a file 2 should have its own blocks. In a single block, In a single block, no two files data. In a single block, right? No two files data to be stored. In a single block, in a single block, no two files data to be stored. Every have data in a block. In a single block, in a single block, no two files data to be stored. Every block will have equal volume. Every block will have equal volume. The last block, except the last block. Every file should have data blocks. In a single block, no two files data to be stored. Every block will have equal volume except the last block. Except the last block means everything having equal volume. See, 64, 64, 64. Only the last block will have less. Configuring block size. Configuring a block size. Configuring means increasing or decreasing. Increasing or decreasing the block size. Go to the Hadoop install directory. The Hadoop install in that HD, we'll see one file with the name hdfs-site.xml. One XML file will see. It's an empty file. You will see. Open this file. It's an empty file. Open this file and configure the following. Open this file and configure the file. Go to the Hadoop directory. In that, we'll see hdfs-site is configured. It's an empty, just XML is your own tag. Configuration, opening. This we say it as closing / configuration. This we can closing that configuration within that property. And / property. Property, right? Property name dfs.block.size. dfs.block.size / name value value for this. See, by default, it is 128 or 64 MB, 64 128. By default, if you're not specifying anything, it takes 128 MB. If you want to keep 50 MB, 50 MB as my default block size, or 100 MB, or 150 MB, or 30 MB, whatever you want to keep, you can keep it. You can configure your own block size. Means your file will be divided, your data file will be divided into this fixed size. Each size will be 50 MB or 100 MB. Example, you have a file like 1000 MB file, 1024. But if you 100, like 11 blocks you get. And we can also get one block size, right? Yes. I'm going to discuss 4 cases. Just observe here. I'm going to discuss 4 cases.
Sir, if we place the size 1 bit, so while increasing data retrieve is fast. If we example one block size is 200 MB like that, so the default we can increase also. You are saying that
Yes.
less blocks means it will fast fetch and difference will come.
Yeah, yes, I was just about to ask the same query. So the
Okay.
same query.
Okay.
Percentages. Having a bigger default block size or smaller. Smaller default block size. Try to answer anyone as per your knowledge. Which is advantages? I'm saying you can set your own block size. So if you are setting bigger default block size, not small.
Sir, it depends on data, right? So if you have a huge data, you can split it, right? So based on that, smaller default block size is better.
Okay, just observe this. Example f1.txt. f1.txt 1000 MB. I'm taking default block size. Default block size taken as 500 MB. 500 MB. How many blocks?
2 blocks we can split.
2 blocks. Is it advantageous? If you have 40 nodes in that, data is stored in only 2 nodes, and data processed by 2 nodes only. Data processed by 2 nodes only. But less speed. If it was default block size, at least around 10 systems should be running parallel. Right? So less speed means just a labor example. You brought for a building construction, you brought 40 labors. In that, you are giving work to only 2 labors. Remaining 38 labors are free, right? If you are given that work to all the labors, should have been high speed. You should have got high speed, right? So high speed. So the data is stored if you are taking like bigger default block size. Data won't be distributed on systems. Only less number of systems the data gets distributed. Only less number of slaves will be running parallelly. You won't achieve that much of speed, right? Yes. And if I take less advantages. Hmm. Okay. For example, assume this example. F2.txt. Only. Default access. 10 MB. Hmm. Number of blocks. Advantages. Is it already the file is already it is a very small file. A very small file. And again dividing into smaller parts. Again dividing into smaller parts. Distributing across multiple systems. And processing and later combining the result. Later combining the result. And later combining the result. Is a time taking process. So the blocks should not be too big or too small. So the block size should not be too big or too small. That's the reason Hadoop has given default block size. 128 MB. Still, okay, depending as you said, right? Even depending upon the data also, you can increase or decrease. Depending upon your cluster capacity, depending upon the incoming data, you can also decrease or increase, right? Based on that, what speed you are expecting, right? So you cannot have too much big or too much small. Okay, understood, right? Yes. This is what default block size. We can also configure, I'm saying. Yes. Now I'm going to discuss 4 cases, right?
So just a small doubt here. If it is the file size is less than the block size means, then how that scenario means?
Now I'm just going to say this.
See that, okay. Because based on that conversation, I got doubt, so that's why I asked.
Here, I discuss 3 cases in that case. 3 in the case 1. One is number of blocks equal to number of slaves. What was that? What was that you asked? If the block size?
No, the block size is default 128 MB, right? So the file have less than block size means how it divided into the blocks like that. Like it did go to the first block only, or again it will also divide
One,
in
only one block. If
one
it
block. Yeah.
has got 64 MB, if it has got 8 MB, the 8 MB will be storing, but remaining will be free.
Okay. Yeah, that only so.
If number of blocks equal to number of slaves. Number of slaves. For example, think that you got 4 blocks. You got 4 slave systems. Number of blocks means B1, B2, B3, B4. Slaves S data storage and processing. How exactly consist in Hadoop?
So I have a model here. So each of the developer data, it's fully loaded or something for storage.
Each block, once again,
If B1 has the 64 MB, the 100 MB data is coming enter into the B1. Is that fully loaded 61 MB or something? Some storage will be
see,
kept like
see very simple, right? You got 10 blocks are there. 10 blocks, 64 MB. Assume that your file is divided into 10 blocks,
okay.
4 MB blocks, f1.txt. F1.txt, 10. You have got how many systems? 5 systems are there.
Yes.
Right? 1, 4, 5. Between with 5 systems are there. This system 1, system 2, system 5. But 10 blocks are how they are going to be stored to this 5 systems. First B1, B2, B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. Again B6, B7, B8, B9, B10. Means each system showing 2 blocks. Each will have equal. Only B10 will have the rest one. Anytime you see whatever only block will have less size. B1, B3, B4, B5. But if you got only 2 systems, in S1 5 blocks will in S2 5 blocks will. Means all will have equal one except the last one will have less one. So the blocks are distributed. So whatever your size, what your work is what? Just specifying the blocks. Automatically it is going to take care of itself.